Now, it is not uncommon, though, for us as independent experts, hundreds of women of all ages, women and girls, having been subjected to gender-based and sexual violence. We have received accounts of rape, gang rape, appalling levels of violence against women. Sexual violence was used as a tool of subjugation, slow actions reportedly taken by law enforcement.
Hello and welcome to this very special broadcast. Today, we're going to talk about the violence which has engulfed the state of Manipur for the last 4 months. It has been about 4 months since a state of civil war has been ensuing in Manipur. Two ethnic groups, the Kukis and the Meiteis, have been engulfed in a battle over land and influence. Shocking video have coming out of Manipur have shown the kind and the amount of violence which the state has seen. Earlier, in the first 3 or 4 months, 3 months rather, there were no internet connection in Manipur. So the information which was coming out of Manipur was limited. But now, since the internet has been restored in parts of Manipur, shocking footage of violence against especially women and children has emerged. So the question is that how does this violence end? And who is the one which will actually first bite the bullet? The state government has been ineffective in controlling the violence. Even today, as we speak, curfew in majority of the capital Imphal continues. There has been violence in the last 2 or 3 days, continuing violence. But the question still remains that how will this violence come to an end? In the midst of all this, the international community has also reacted to the violence. A press release by the UN experts has cited that there has been considerable violence against women and children, and it's a cause of concern. Today, we're going to talk about the UN press release, and we're going to have a UN expert talking about what the press release was, on what basis the UN has had that press release. Today, we're joined by Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls. Reem Al Salem joins us today and will talk about the press release which came out a few days ago on the Manipur violence by UN experts. Hello, ma'am. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so ma'am, we start with my first question, that how has the gender-based violence and sexual violence against women and girls in Manipur escalated in recent months, according to the UN expert findings?
So, as we said in our press release that we put out earlier this week, we have received reports of hundreds of women of all ages, women and girls, having been subjected to gender-based and sexual violence. We all have seen, to our horror, the images and the videos that have emerged of Kuki women being paraded naked in the street in Manipur. That is supposed to have happened in May. As you rightly said, the videos only started emerging in July. And that's due to the reported internet ban. So it's really very, very concerning. As I said, the overwhelming and vast majority of the victims were Kuki women that are majority, of course, Christians. And we have received accounts of rape, gang rape, appalling levels of violence against women that has included also burning them, either alive, hacking them to death, burning their corpses, denying dead women appropriate burial rights. So it's very clear to us that the rape that was perpetrated, the sexual violence, was used as a tool of subjugation of the communities, of control, and punishing the women for essentially belonging to the ethnic and religious minorities that they belong to. I should say that sexual violence and gender-based violence is not the only thing that we spoke about. Of course, we also allude to the forced disappearance, the unlawful killing, the forced displacement of persons, the burning of religious sites, churches, houses, crop was destroyed, and many of these actions, of course, if if they were also suffered at the hands of agents of the state, then they would also constitute acts of torture under international human rights law.
Absolutely, ma'am. Absolutely. Horrific crimes in Manipur, and that's the subject of our discussion today. I would also want you to elaborate on the factors contributing to the reported violence against women and girls in Manipur, particularly from the Kuki community.
So we are aware, as you are aware, that this is, of course, not the first time that we witness violence in Manipur. This is perhaps the latest round of violence. It's very multi-layered, very complex. There are many factors at play, including ethnic and religious grounds. So I think this was basically a continuation of that. However, as we surely will touch upon later, it was spurred and accelerated also by hate speech that preceded the violence, and also slow actions reportedly taken by law enforcement when the first wave of violence started occurring.
Absolutely, ma'am. The law enforcement in the state has been under a cloud under the fact the way they've acted in the last 3 or 4 months since the violence broke out. I also want to touch upon the fact that the UN experts mentioned that counter-terrorism measures were allegedly misused to justify acts of violence and repression against ethnic and religious minorities. What is the ways these acts of violence were justified, ma'am?
It's important to know that under international human rights law, on the right to life, but also on the use of force by law enforcement officials, as well as under customary international law, I should add, the use of force must be proportionate, and the use of lethal force, so force that is there to kill, basically, it must be the ultimate recourse, and it can only be used in self-defense. So basically, when all other means have been exhausted, including non-lethal force. So what we are basically saying is that if civilians have been killed in Manipur under the pretext that they were terrorists, then any alleged death within the context of counterterrorism operations must be investigated, regardless of whether the victim is a civilian or an alleged terrorist. And so who dies in the course of or as a result of counterterrorism or security operations.
Well, I mean, that's something which a lot of investigation authorities, in fact, there is an independent inquiry which has been conducted. I hope these concerns are addressed in that report. But also, ma'am, I would want to touch upon the responses of the Indian government. Has the Indian government responded to your press release, including what the law enforcement locally in Manipur, to the physical and sexual violence, as well as the hate speech, which you've touched upon?
Let me perhaps clarify something, Kashif, also to your audience about the way we work as independent experts that are elected by the Human Rights Council and to whom we also report and where our accountability lies, which is, of course, made of member states. So any press release we put out, such as the one we put out with regards to Manipur, is preceded by a letter to the concerned government. So in this case, our press release was preceded by a letter to the government of India. We call that an allegation letter because we present the allegations or the reported incidents and events that have reached us from credible sources. Now, in it, we ask always any recipient government to also tell us their side of the story or how they understand the issues to have happened, and also to tell us what they are planning to do about the events to stop the violations that have reportedly taken place, if they have taken place, and also how they will deal with the situation. Now, governments and also non-government actors that receive our letters, they have usually 60 days to respond. After the 60 days, the letter we send, as well as the response, if there is a response, is usually published. So all the letters we sent out to anybody ever is that our official letters are in a database that is publicly available, that you can access to, that anyone anywhere in the world can look at, can also, look at according to the governments that have received it or according to theme, etc. Now, it is not uncommon, though, for us as independent experts to issue a press release before the 60 days have elapsed. So especially if the situation is sufficiently grave or important for us to pronounce ourselves on because of what has reportedly happened. Because it's important, we feel that we also communicate that we as human rights experts are following the situation, are monitoring the situation, but also because in the situation that we have at hand, it is still evolving, it is still very delicate, it's still very, it's still very problematic. I mean, we know that in Manipur, even until mid-August, some people were still killed, right? And so everything is at the edge, and you also in your introduction pointed to still skirmishes of fighting happening. So what I want to say is India, therefore, is not being singled out either by the letter or by the press release. In fact, it's something we do in other situations as well. And in fact, only a few days earlier, we did the same thing with regards to Sudan. We issued a press release on also a very concerning situation of sexual violence that has been reported to us within the context of the conflict in Sudan. That was also preceded by an allegation letter to the party concerned. So I'm looking forward to really the response from the government. We look forward to engaging the government on these issues, as we do with all governments. We hope that we can enter into a conversation. I am traveling next week also to Geneva, and have expressed my interest to meet with the government, with the permanent mission of India. And also, by the way, we have communicated with the government on a range of issues, human rights issues in the past. This is not the first time that we send a letter to the government of India, and a number of the issues raised in our current letter on Manipur are issues that we have raised also in the past with regards to other minorities, with regards to other regions in India. So this is not the first time.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for talking to us. That was Reem Al-Salem, Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls.
Thank you again for taking the time.